Oh my gosh, the news out there is just such a doozy, isn't it? For the first time, I really can see. Maybe I'm just a slow learner, which we know. I'm kind of slow. Well, I don't know how square I am. But anyway, you really do see that some of these podcasts are getting their hands on real evidence, and they're just like the Zorro Ranch stuff. I don't know. Are they discussing that stuff on like MS Now or the Zorro Ranch stuff with Epstein? That's going to be gnarly, and a few podcasts have started really going deep on that. And there's a whole history of New Mexico, and get this, Donald Barr, of course, it was the person that gave Epstein his first job at Dalton Academy. Donald Barr was like the principal of the school or whatever. And Donald Barr was also an agent for intelligence, if it was CIA, I suppose. And then Bill Barr, Donald Barr's son, was the Attorney General for Trump. And in 2019, Bill Barr put a stop to investigations at Zorro Ranch. Oh. Okay. So now, I digress. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about logic. So, this unit, voltage controlled ADSR LFO. You can see, I'm not using it right now. You can see I'm not going to point at them, but worthy of note, really, there are some levels. There's a COM level CV. There's an end EOA and EOR, end of attack, end of release. And you'll also see a manual switch that shows times 10, times 100, and times 1. So this is like, your LFO length, and then your ADSR stages are going to correspond to selectable sections of the envelope curve. So it's almost like, the way that I'm understanding it is like you have just a big sample, like a big chunk of sound, and then you've got start and end points of a loop, and you can select. So I guess from what I've understood reading about it, end of attack and end of release are sort of like the loop start and end points, and then the ADSR curve is like the total length of a sample. But when I hook the darn thing up, and I've been experimenting with it for like a day, and it's just one of the, and I did this before. When I got the unit, I tried to figure it out. And it's a very frustrating unit, because no matter how much you experiment with the inputs, it's really hard to get any kind of really widely variable behavior out of end of attack or end of release. They just seem to be state gates that are activated within very narrow tolerances of the parameter values of the machine. So anyway, I get to thinking a lot about state gates and everything, and in general, back to this idea of these two A111-3 units. You've got the sync the I guess it's hard sync in. You've got also has pulse width, also have pulse width input, but mainly it's the sync, the oscillator sync. So the last few recordings that I uploaded, really are depending a lot on spiking with some edge, like the beginning of a sawtooth or a square, spiking the sync start of an oscillator. And then if you have drifting frequencies of those edges, then it starts sounding like they fight each other in interesting ways. There's also an interesting input. There are two inputs. There's a low frequency, linear FM input, which is LM, and then there's an exponential FM input, that's XM. And there's a knob for the XM input, I guess, attenuating the logarithmic, or the curve anyway. And so changing the frequency of those oscillators combined with start and end points creates, all kinds of glitchy, right? So, but then in relation to the looping ADSR LFO, I got to thinking about, and here's a really general problem in computer music that this really betrays or shows the limits of, my sophistication as a logician. But basically, like, let's say you've got an ADSR and you've got you've got a gate on the sustain, and let's say your tempo is going, fairly swiftly, like 130 BPM, and you've got very long durations for the envelope stages, such that in order to get to the sustain gate out, the envelope would have to wait for some duration of a longer beat than one going at 130 BPM, because every beat at 130 resets an envelope that maybe it never even gets to the decay stage. The envelope could have, just at the attack stage, it could have a very gradual onset. So the problem is that if you have a long periodic process, which Eurorack or just modular in general suggests that you could have a whole chain of periodic processes just by setting up conditional gates and putting your conditional gate to the gate input of another unit, and then take a gate input out of that unit, right? You imagine all kinds of elaborate chains of causality like that, causal chains, but then it depends on an onset that then cannot be present for the duration of the long process. So you have to turn the onset off. The input from the tempo at 130, you have to turn it off once the process starts. And that involves some kind of logic step, and that's why I have basically a couple of cases full of and or units. And the other, I think I did show and tell once with the and or units, but this is a Mazatron. This is an interesting unit, and they're very cheap. Inexpensive Mazatron stuff. This is just for 4 AND circuits. So I tried a couple of things with this in conjunction with that looping LFO ADSR. Then I just got to thinking about that really a logic gate, all it is, it's a pulse wave. There's no difference. I mean, it's just a pulse wave is maximum voltage, minimum voltage. That's all. And then control voltage is continuity in between. Now, so a logic circuit gets you a pulse just the same as a regular pulse that's coming, say, from an LFO, square wave LFO. So the logic circuit gets you a pulse. And if you plug that pulse into both the inputs, so we're talking about two logic circuits that are cascaded. So one is the presupposition of the other. And then the outputs of both, one goes into the one sync input of the A111-3 VCO LFO, and the other one into the sync of the other one. Here, this is the sync in of one, and this is the sync in of the other. So the one coming from the top logic circuit, the output of the one top, and the second one is the under the top logic circuit. This is the brown cable that goes to the other sync jack. And then there I also have other speed LFOs. There's some subtle stuff happening. This is the XM input, so the exponential frequency modulation input. This is the other exponential frequency modulation input. And then there's one linear FM input coming from a triangle wave driving it. And the key point, okay, so there is only one, we're only listening to one audio signal, and it's coming out the triangle. So it's a triangle wave being modulated by these few things. Now that is about as simple a patch as you can come up with. It's literally two oscillators with hard sync, a few control LFOs, and two AND circuits. That's all. I mean, you can, how much does that get? I mean, as a setup, you could probably play live with that setup. You've got a quad LFO, you've got two VCO LFOs. That's about $600 for the three. You know, let's say they're all $200 a piece, which they're not. The Mazatron's probably $100. So that with a $500 setup, I haven't even touched the knobs. This is what's happening is you've got LFOs that are going at varying rates. You've got ramps and you've got gates, right? Square. And all the events are just happening at the logic circuits. Which can also invert so that changed most likely because of this LFO here is very slow. That one is the one that's making the apparent 16 bar reset. That inverted the logical relationship. Each logic circuit has an invert. So now probably we should get not 16 bar changes, but maybe Donald bar changes. No, Epstein bar changes. 8 bar changes. What is making that pop, pop, pop? Can I change that? I don't know what's making it. It's still there, right? It's still there. That was literally just changing the frequency of one of those A111-3s from 5 to 3. That was 3 to 4 on the same unit. That was 4 to 4.5 on the same unit. On the other unit, I will go now from 5 to 4.5, and they will, ostensibly, they will start phasing. Okay, I'll go from 4.5 on one of them to 3.5. Okay, I'll go on the other three, down to 3.5 on the other one. So now, from going from 4 to 3.5, that's making this. Now, can I change something else and change that sound without going back to 4.5? Because the lower frequency, I turned it back from 3.5 to 5, and all that noise thing going, that went away. Why? Because the lower frequencies cause all of that kind of. You make the lower frequencies higher, and they. How's that for a description? Because. Why does the sleep medication function the way it does, dear professor? Because it has a dormitive capacity. separating all those drum timbers. See? Right there, that's it. Sorry. Not bad. Occam's razor. Quite real. Quite a real thing. None of that would be possible without truth and logic. And it's the very same truth and logic that give us Donald Barr and Bill Barr and Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. And it's all the same truth and logic. Same shit. It's merely and only that nobody would like to bind their sentences to those principles which I have just demonstrated.